does.
Okay. So I could show the slide. I could have shown the slides directly, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you? So I uploaded also a short video. Did somebody watch that? I guess not. Right? So okay. So there's no redundancy. Okay. So I just want to make sure that's short. And so what are patterns? You can simply say they are a way to describe recurrent good solutions in a very systematic way. And that's it. So one sentence. So that's in a nutshell. But of course, it starts with asking what is good practice, and there's a whole theory behind that. And but before we go to that, I'm just waiting for the next slide. This is okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
So actually, there's it's showing the wrong. It's showing the wrong screen. It doesn't show my PowerPoint presentation. It just
That's a difference.
full screen. Is that full screen? Yes.
Yes, that makes sense.
That was
So we are all very familiar with what patterns are because we see them everywhere. There are patterns everywhere in this room. Windows are patterns, cars are patterns, and what you see there is that each car has a different shape, a different form. They all share some commonality. But so these are very simple patterns, and you really describe them usually. But the idea of patterns comes from the field of classic architecture. So not software architecture, but real architecture, from Christopher Alexander. And he was defining patterns such as having windows or window light from both sides. So he says there should be not only light from this side, we have some light from there as well. That's the way it should be designed. Or when you place a table. Another pattern who's written is the window table. So that you can sit at the window, watch outside. So the configuration within the room, or even on a larger scale, how to create cities, buildings, and so on.
Like to jump in, because the origin or the motivation for Alexander and his colleagues to work on this was that they discovered that new buildings in the 60s, they started to become somehow more ugly than all the buildings, and they recognized that people feel better in certain places compared to other places. And what they thought was that there must be something in these better places, or places where people feel more alive, or it feels more natural to be there. They prefer some places. And actually the idea was to look at what are the aspects of these places where people feel more comfortable, more better, more and what are these aspects, and how can we describe these in a way that they can be reused for building new places with the same good aspects or characteristics of these old places. Because we somehow, they said that we seem to lose this knowledge. We just build more and more ugly buildings, and patterns are a way of looking at these aspects which are good, which can be used for designing new spaces. Reusing existing knowledge on what feels good, what is good.
But doesn't that introduce also the idea that certain spaces are designed in certain ways for particular effects? Like if it's an ugly space or a space without windows, that, you know, they argued in the 60s that they were designing those spaces in order to prevent organization, in order to prevent the student movement, in order to prevent, so like, yeah, there are certain elements that are happy spaces, but there are also certain elements that are designed for spaces that now we've started to look at, right? Like, and that was designed with an intention, right? And at that point, that intention seemed good almost. I don't know what I'm saying.
But I think so. I think the ugly houses of the 60s, for example, they also had good patterns in them because, well, at least in Denmark, the reason for them being so was to, economical reasons to prevent heat outlet, or so there was not so many windows because windows were emitting a lot of heat, so let's not have windows. Efficiency or sustainability, you would say today. Sustainability is a very nice pattern. Out,
So it's a functional consideration, and actually, Christopher Alexander kind of never. He was really like making beautiful spaces.
Because otherwise
and
it's
he's not.
really conservative, right? Let's go back.
So that's also something that was claimed all the time. Let's go. That he's very conservative, but he's actually what he was doing. He was not saying, "Well, I don't care about sustainability or function," but he says, even if we do that, beauty and in a way that people build. So the idea when he was collecting with his team the patterns was to give ordinary people a language actually to express how they wanted their buildings to be built. Making reason about that. And there's, I think we will come to that later. So what you can always say about a pattern is it has positive and negative effects.
Yeah.
So in the Alexandrian world, it's only positive effects, but in the computer science world, we think the pattern fits to a specific context, and it has some good and some negative effects. And about the negative effects, you have to help. So one more example where we all see patterns and can recognize the patterns is these bridges, where you see they all look different and yet they have the same, not only the same aspects, they have the same structure. I think it's very important when we talk about patterns that we think about structures that are similar. The bridge example shows very well one other term that is used frequently in this pattern, which is forces. So the reason why this bridge is built in this specific way is to balance the physical forces that would be built otherwise. That is, in a different way, it wouldn't stand all the weight. And this idea of physical forces was transferred into social forces by Christopher Alexander. There are some forces that attract us more to the windows. It's better to have the table there. Or there's some forces of when you're waiting for the bus, to have some kind of conversation. So it's good to have a coffee shop at a bus station. Beer halls, it's actually a pattern. Beer halls, beer halls in your neighborhoods. A place we can get together. Education, the forces that are driving us is like how much time do we have? How much time do the students have? How much money do we have? What is the political intent? All these kind of things are shaping the solution that it's not a coincidence why we have it. There is a reason for why we do it. Sure. And if we think about education, one simple example, which has not been described as a design audience, but it is one, is a multiple-choice test, which can look a million different ways, but it's always the same concept. And what's more important, you can do it the right or the wrong way. So you can have a multiple-choice test, and you can implement it very, very deadly, and also use it for the wrong things. So there's only specific kind of factual knowledge that you can test with that. So very important in the category that we're not only saying something is a good solution, it is only a good solution for a specific goal or for a specific. So this is the example from the pattern language of Christopher Alexander, and they always have this structure of by the name, so we have vocabulary to express what we want to build. Why do we do this? That's very important also when we talk about the patterns that we found in the morning. To think about if we do that, why do we do that? What's the problem that we want to solve? And then what is the the context in which this pattern makes sense? It's not just do this, or not an imperative of do this always, but there's a specific context where you do that. And then there's a set of forces. So this is just one force, there are usually more than. And then you got the solution, and this is always written in a therefore build bus stop so that they form tiny centers of public life and so on. And then you see also there's a small structural drawing. So this is an example from the 253 patterns in architecture that have been first identified. And what this is about is tells you why to do that, when to do it, why to do it in a specific way. So that is the forces that explain why does this structure solve the problem. And then the solution tells you what is the structure of the solution and how can you actually build it. And that's the book when it all started.
In addition to the forces, is also they explain why the problem is a problem and why there is no shortcut answer to that. So why don't we do this just that? The force also describes well, this is going on here, and if you do this, then you don't solve the problem actually. So the forces are, I think, the most difficult part of patterns, but also the most powerful. If you understand the forces, what's going on, then you're really deep into the problem, and also making a good step towards the solution space. So how do I solve this? Because then you look also at the different forces that have impact. How does the solution impacts or balances the forces in a way that we end up in a somewhat better situation, whatever that better means.
Because they explain and reason about the solution, they enable you to adapt the solution. So you don't have to follow the pattern strictly. You get an understanding of why you do this, and then you can modify it. If you understand why you do that, way you can modify it. So the common definition, I think it's the most used definition from this book, is that a pattern is, it always describes a problem that occurs over and over again in our environment. So it's very important to say this problem only occurs in a specific environment. So it's always a three-part rule: context, and in the context you find a problem, and for this problem in that context you can work with this solution. We have shown that this solution works in this context. And then the implementation is not like a step-by-step script that tells you exactly run 2 minutes this, make 5 minutes this, but it's more generic, where you can replace parts and you can leave the class. It's really making it, we still have the same general structure, but you can implement it in many different ways. The definition that is also very important is that the pattern is not a solution alone, but it works together with other patterns or with other solutions. It's not a complete solution, it's just an interaction of solutions. So for example, yesterday we figured that using Google Hangout or other conferences is a very good solution to integrate other people who are not here. So this is a solution for this context where people are participating from other people. So it's a good solution, but it has consequences, like we had some technical difficulties. And to address these difficulties, we can have other patterns, like I put the technical concierge on. So have somebody who's taking care of the technical problems, so that the people who want to discuss can actually focus on it. And if somebody remotely has a problem, that person can chat with that person. So really having a caretaker. And that is a very important thing to understand, that patterns are not working in isolation, but they work together to form a solution.
And also, the pattern itself is not a use Google Hangouts, but the pattern actually will be used a video conference system where you can add and can watch remotely. If it's Google Hangouts, is a specific implementation, right, in our context. And that's meant that without ever doing it the same way twice. Next EduPLoP, we're sitting in a different location probably, and different participants, and maybe another kind of internet connection, or we're applying the same pattern, but doing it in a slightly different way.
Yeah. There's also, in the morning, we were collecting all these examples and stories, and some of the stories are similar, yet different, but they have the same pattern, they have the same gestalt, same form that can be used. One example, this is language I wrote maybe 5 or 6 years ago about online trainings, and where you can see there are different kinds of online trainings, different speakers, different topics, different participants. And the online training is one pattern, but there's more patterns to it, a whole network of patterns that you should use if you want to run a successful online training. So it's not a solution in itself, you have to make some other things to have it work. It's like having an invisible co-host. So that's something we did at our e-teaching portal, where we had invisible, a second person who was considering the chat messages, and because if you do the presentation, you're fully focused on it. Somebody is writing down the messages on a sticky note and just puts it to the presenter. And the interesting thing is we came up with that solution, and I know from other institutes that they do the same solution. So it's not just a coincidence that we were doing it, there must be a reason. So 2 independent institutes or more of that come up with the same solution. It's likely that there's a reason for it. So this is what we did at the last EduPLoP 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, in the Netherlands, where we had a lot of patterns on assessment-driven course design. So the interplay, and so the structure is always we have, I don't know whether you can read it, but there is a context description. That's where we start with. Maybe you can show the sections.
So this time we start with a summary, and this one can also be used for overviews in a repository or for card text, for example.
No, that's not working.
Demonstrate how you do that.
This is the context. You're designing the assessment structure for a new course. So this is a situation where you're in at this very moment. And then you can run into, you decide here, and then there are some mixtures and formats and different parts. So we start with the forces. All students are different. Some students are better test takers, and some are better writers, speakers, etc. And then we come to the core of the problem, which is some students may be particularly weak on some assessment instruments independent of their learning. So, and that's a problem. How to solve it? Therefore, use a variety of assessment vehicles within the course. So the structure, context, forces, problem, core of the solution. And this, I think, is also a powerful thing to do, to try to identify really what's the most important aspect and formulate it in 1-2 sentences.
Yeah.
That really helps you start to think about, okay, what's really the essence of it, and not starting to write 2 A4 pages with lots of instructions and important material, and then you have that helps you to make things really clear, like what we tried here. What's the core of it? That's a daily showcase artifact. Have the students present or work on a daily basis on an artifact that they can show, and then there come some more parts.
All the implementation details you have, if you want to do that, okay, you have to book a room before, or you have to bring posts. So all these details that you need if you want to implement that. The core solution should be quite briefly, so that you can scan through all the patterns and find the right ones. And also, but the problem and the forces, they are really very important. And when we write the patterns, very often writing down the solution is the most hard, because we know the solution from our experience. We should. All of the patterns or all of the stories that we put on the table, they should be based on our experience or from stories we learned from other people. So we know about the solutions. And it's much harder to defend and explain why are we doing it in the first place, and why are we doing it that way and not another way. So, and this is the tricky part. The same thing what we did yesterday was the finding the values. This can really help to explain why is this a good solution. And then the last bit, which starts with, you may expect, this is where we make one more time explicit what's the great thing about the pattern, what's the positive aspect, the benefits. And then we say there's also some liabilities or some drawbacks. We say, however, there's some things that are not good. So for example, if we run this Hangout, however, it's not working if you have a modem connection that's very slow. Which, right, this doesn't invalidate the pattern as a good solution, but it tells you it only works in that situation where we have a high bandwidth internet connection. If you don't have that, this is not for you. This is not the solution. So that's the important thing to also make explicit. What's the downside? What is the drawback? What are the liabilities? What other patterns do you have to use? And to sum up, in a way, I think we're looking for the patterns that are good. So they should always be nuggets of wisdom, and they should not be invented. They should exist already. So they should be based on real stories and that's why they are written very often in wikis, or we will use Google Docs for that. There's an iterative process of refining them. The pattern community has also some other instruments to improve that. We have a shepherding process, so when we submit patterns that we write here to the pattern conferences, we will get a shepherd. And the shepherd will work with us on 3 or more iterations. It's a non-anonymous peer review, so you know the reviewer, so you have a personal connection. Then you go.
And the moment you become
then you become a she, exactly. And you have to do it again.
no one is watching. No.
We will.
So how does the sheep? So what's the significance of the sheep?
The shepherd.
Got it.
So Christian submitted a patent paper and I shepherded him, and then some other time I submitted a patent paper and he shepherded me. But it's quite different than your standard peer review, which is, okay, I've read your papers, this is what I think of it, and just bugger off, right? It's an interactive dialogical process. So I, as a shepherd, have some responsibility to help you make this paper better, rather than just kind of an opportunity to show you how smart I am.
Exactly.
It's a very constructive process. So if you just write, I didn't like it, doesn't work. You have to write, didn't like that section because of, and these are the ways how to improve, or ask questions how the author could improve them. And this is a process that is actually very important in the pattern community. It's actually monitored by program committee members. So the program committee members monitor the shepherding process, so to ensure that there really is communication so usually they don't have to jump in, but if it's a very negative conversation, it's monitored and it's all tracked.
You can kind of say, yeah, I really like the white spaces, all the rest should be deleted.
Yes, that's the common joke. If you have to
Not everything on page.
So these are the comments that are usually not done in the writer, not in the shepherding process, but maybe in the writer's workshop. So that's what we do at the conferences. We have one other instrument of providing feedback, and that's at these conferences we do writers' workshops. So that means that a group of people provides feedback to the author. So unlike what I'm doing right now, I have a presentation, and what you see in most conferences, people stand in front and they just talk about the paper, and then everybody goes to coffee break, and that's it. So what? So you can do that online or read it on. In the writers' workshop, all the people in the workshop have read your paper in advance.
Yeah.
And you as an author, you don't say anything. You write there and sit there and write down the notes. So you get feedback from other people how to improve it. And you're not allowed to defend it. Because you think if somebody reads the paper, you're not there as an author as well. So you don't have the chance of saying, I meant it this way. So this is really not about defending, it's about improving. Once you experience that, other academic conferences are really getting annoyed or annoying you. So it's a really nice experience. So feedback is really important and refining patterns all the time. So they should be valuable, of course, and shared. And also, so one of the common questions, how do I know whether is it a principle, is it a pattern, is it just one example? And a good way to think about it, everything that you can grasp mentally is a pattern. So This cup is in a way a pattern. Something to drink out of is not a pattern, because it's too abstract. There are many different ways to do that. Or in education, to say, I want to motivate my students. That's a goal. It's not a pattern, because there's so many different ways to do that. To say they get an award at the beginning, at the end, so that's a concrete way of doing it. So that would be a pattern. So they have a kind of gestalt. They don't say motivate students. You say quiz games could be one way, awards, showcases, or talk about the Trump election, having some current affairs, or invite people to conferences and say, if you make a good paper, you can come with me. One last example of how to describe patterns, which is very important for us when we start writing the patterns. I always explain that kind of with the past contemporary. You see this several times now. So you can jump in when I say something wrong, or I understand it. So we all have all these terms like context, forces, consequences, and this is very strict terminology in the pattern community. If you think about a simple path to goal, and it's easier to understand what we mean by that. For example, you are in a environment, and you are at a specific position, and you want to go there. So what? You don't have a problem yet. The problem comes in. But first of all, this is the context. This is the overall situation, and your pattern only works in this landscape. Then you say you have a problem. So why is it bad? Why do I want to be here? So maybe this is not a safe place overnight. So I have to be here because there's a building or there's a water place. So there must be a reason why I want to go there. And then there must be trouble why I cannot go there directly. So for example, this steep wall stops me to go there. So there is really an imperative to do something. And the pattern then is one way to go to the solution. So that's the green path. This is one, it's not the only way, but it's one way to get there. And the reason why it is shaped that way are the forces. That's what you see here. So the forces in the landscape would be, the canyon, or that you have to want to go somewhere to have a scenic view, or you have to refill your water. So these are all forces that shape the way. And what you see, the blue passes, they are alternatives. So the pattern is never the only, nor is it the best solution. It's only one solution we know about. We know it leads to the goal. And we can explain why it's working. It's working because there's no canyon in between. There is no danger part of the hike. So all these kind of things. And then there are consequences where you say, okay, I decided to use that solution, or I have decided to use that path. However, to make it a real success, I have to make some other preparations. Like, for example, if there are these kind of cactuses.
Yeah,
You know, this spiky plants. You have to put on some boots, so that's a consequence, right? Otherwise, it's really a pain to go there. You can go there, but if you go there barefoot, it's not fun. So that's what we make explicit in the consequences to ensure that it's going to be a success. So that's about the terminology, where we talk always about context, problem, forces. So the core problem is also a force, actually. The forces are more explaining why this way, why it doesn't have this shape. Anything to add?
There are few little things to add. One thing is many pattern authors choose to have a section that's called related patterns.
Yeah.
If you probably don't remember, but in the example we gave from the assessment patterns, there was one in small caps, one little thing. That's a reference to another existing pattern. So I personally prefer, but that depends on the pattern, to include the references to related patterns in the text, in the place where they belong, where the reference, where the relation actually is to the other pattern. And these relations, actually, these are an important part of the language aspect of patterns. So that you can choose some kind of starting point, and from there you go through the related patterns to address all the aspects that are relevant in your specific context. And some of them are not relevant because you do not run into that specific problem, or you don't have that problem. You have so much money, you don't need to think about the money. So that's not an issue. And other places this, so you need to look for alternatives for buying the most expensive materials, stuff like that. So that's one important aspect. And another one is what
because we're talking about relations. So to stay this metaphor, one of the so the relations that you can see here, for example, is this green path is one pattern, and one related pattern is the blue path, which is an alternative. Another related pattern could be the next path that starts here, right? So when I'm here, what to do next? What to add? Or what very often happens if you look, let's say, just at this section, this is not described in detail, but you could, for example, have another pattern that describes this section in detail. So each sub-path is also a pattern. So this is like, when I was talking about the online training, that's the whole pattern. And in the pattern, I make references to the other patterns, like having a co-host or prepare examples. So you can build one larger pattern out of smaller patterns. And then you just refer to the other patterns.
In some cases, you also have alternatives, and it's good to name them in the patterns. So you have something that also solves the problem, but it leads to certain different consequences. So it's good to look at this as well in order to make it feel well a good choice between these two alternatives to solve that problem. And another section which is very important is the known uses, or the example section. So that's some kind of proof that we're really talking about a pattern. That if we have a couple of examples, known implementations, that things we really experienced in the real world, and they worked, these are some sort of support of that pattern. And we use the so-called rule of three. If it's 3 occurrences, then we really talk about a pattern. If it's only one, then it can be just an accident that it worked. It only worked this one time, and it won't work the next time. But if it worked 3 times, then the chance is very high that it also will work the 4th, 5th, etc. If not, then we have to adjust the pattern to see, okay, what are the aspects we were missing yet, and then we come back to the iterative part of it, which we are not that good in yet, because after the patterns are published, then most of them not touched anymore, but they should. So that's why repositories will be an important aspect, but we're also not that good in building repositories that really are useful for people. And also be used for adapting existing patterns. But that's actually the original idea. So the book, a pattern language, was not originally intended as a book, but as some kind of workbook where you can pull out pages, change them, put them back in, and some patterns die, there come new patterns in, patterns are reworked, adapted to changing environment, that kind of, but they only published it as a book and never touched it again. Another critic from many people on the work.
So you just said that the refinement, so that's another example. If you look at the image on the upper left side, there's the writers group circle. And these are some examples of the feedback I got. So on the left side, you see I get really tons of papers now with feedback on the publications. We also have a couple of feedbacks. One very common question that I get from is the why. This thing that will happen for the next days. So just to be prepared, if you have a pattern person in the group, we will ask again and again, why? And why that way? Why not this? Why not another way? What is the reason for that? And because that is so, the solutions we know, we've seen that. That's why we put them on the table. Why do they work? I think one shortcoming in our community is also that most people don't talk about when. because we don't have all the empirical evidence when and when not. So this is actually something we just figured out when to use them and when not.
Let's go to look at that quote, which is fantastic on the problem. The problem, sometimes we do things and we know that works well. If you give a lecture and students stay and they have more questions and they look at oh, we're already 10 minutes all the time and everybody's so busy so you know that was a really good lecture. Compared to one where after 10 minutes everybody starts to look out, one more hour to go, I want to leave. And then maybe you know somehow, okay, I did this, I did that, and one step further, and that helped me a lot, I think, in my education, because I came from industry and I walked into education, and I started to ask myself, why? What happens when I don't apply the solution? This is a good question to come to the problem. No? What happens if I don't do this? If nothing changes, then it doesn't matter if you do it or not. Right? So then you don't really have a solution, you don't really have a pattern. Wearing blue or black trousers is certainly not a pattern because it doesn't change anything. So this problem part is also, you see many patterns. If you look at them, the problem statement is something like how to. And this is really something I'm allergic to, because this is not the problem. This is something the problem should trigger, actually, this question. Right? How to, and then comes the solution, but then it's hard to really find a good problem that is described as a question. How to solve this, do this, but what's the core of the problem here? Well, what I personally like to have a problem statement that triggers that how-to question, that I really I kind of feel the pain, and then I said, shit, I really want to do something about how to solve this problem. And then comes the solution. But that's quite hard to learn.
I think most of that we will learn in the actual writing process. And I think that was my last slide actually. So I'm writing today. I think it's now time to get the experience. But first, doesn't make sense what we were just saying. There's a like I mean, that's also. I mean, in a way, it's so obvious to make it that way, so that one critique is always, well, we do that all the time. It's nothing new. Right, but most books on education don't do that. They get around the why part very easily and get away with it. And patterns are really, so when we start writing, we have really the headlines. Forces, problems, a very structured approach. And that is very often a pain because you don't have the why or the answers, but we have to do it to find it.
It's interesting too because it's a kind of thinking that is, I'm sure it has been for a while. It's not necessarily new, but when you're talking about instructional design, right, or instructional technology, that field, let's just say, a lot of things are, I want to use this tool, I want to use this, I want to play with, and oftentimes you'll hear people saying, like, what exactly, before we even talk about that, what are you trying to do? Yeah. What's the issue? And that, to me, seems like a good example of design thinking or pattern thinking through what is this thing you're trying to change, solve. So going back to the problem, because a lot of people, like, I'm designing this great app or this great thing, but they don't have any sense of why. Yeah. Like, to what end?
Or why and in which situation, right? It could be that it's a great app in one situation, and it's a bad app in another situation.
So maybe we can take, one of the patent candidates on the table and go through the process, and then see. Yeah.
So you people, what do you want first?
I think that the why. Actually, my understanding of patterns is that they were always there, and we all apply lots of them. Yes. We are just not aware of that, and that's and also experts do. If you look at an expert doing something like an architect, he just makes a drawing, or she, and then it's a good solution, or it's already pretty close to a really high-level solution. That doesn't mean that this process was not going on, but it goes on implicit. It's tacit knowledge, and what patterns do, and that's, I think it's a big benefit. They make this tacit knowledge explicit.
Yeah.
They get the knowledge out of the experts, and the process of pattern writing can be a benefit for an expert to become aware of what am I actually doing and why am I doing it. Even though that doesn't change the way they do things, but it creates awareness and also something to share with others. Discussing, I did this pattern writing workshops, pattern writing workshops also with colleagues, and it was some kind of intervision also. You start to talk about things and you discover things, and in some cases people only have a problem. That's also fine, because there's a good chance that someone somewhere has a solution. It might not be the best solution, but it is a solution. You can use it as a starting point to move towards a better solution.
Yeah. Now, I think that idea of making it explicit, like we all work in patterns, but then those patterns also helping you, approach other problems in similar ways, right? Yeah. Big fan.
Yeah, me too.
I read all your patterns closely.
So which one should we pick? Pick any of them.
We can start with one of these ones. I think we called it less is more.
Yeah.
And the idea was to make restrictions on student work to promote creativity, and the other is rapid prototyping of the stories in class in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And this is nice because there's two different things. If you look at these, but there's one pattern behind it. So maybe we could use this one for.
I could speak a little bit to the problem. Like, so if we're talking about a problem, right? On that example.
Yeah.
Or is that how you do it?
It depends. Sometimes I start with a solution, or it's hard for me now to go back to when I started with writing patterns, because I have so many things in my mind, and it's just like a brain map. For that one, it would be a brain map. Just start to fill in all the sections, and then I start to reorganize it a little bit. And so it's hard for me to say. It's better to start with that one. I don't know what would you suggest. How to start with that? You should use
No, I was actually picking that up, and I don't know whether I should start discussing right away.
So which one?
Actually,
Let's start with the name for this pattern. Which pattern are we taking? Is it a rapid prototyping or less is more?
So the title is less is more, and then Christian says that there are two instances that are the same: make restrictions on student work to promote creativity, and the other one is rapid prototype. Well, actually, I disagree that I think these are two patterns.
That's a difficult part of the
Okay.
discussion.
Are there two problems?
So you can have restriction without for you can have the restriction for really foster creativity. There are lots of restriction, like only use Lego bricks, or only use a pen, or only use words that start with S. So that's really that's a very good.
So that's what you would call creative constraints, right?
Yeah.
So is it?
That is creative constraint. Actually, creative constraint is. So I'm writing patterns on innovation. There's a pattern in there. I don't know whether it has that name, but it's exactly that pattern.
But it might be interesting also just to put it in context. Like, why would you do a 20-minute audio story just on that? Because the idea pedagogically is you want students to actually create something as a group quick, rather than sitting around talking about, this is a great audio story. No, I want you to do it.
Exactly.
So
that's
the problem.
So that's why I think that there's a relationship. If you do rapid prototyping, it does instantiate the restriction, but there's more to rapid prototyping because the structure is different there. It's like you have a specific goal doing it rapidly, And also you get quicker feedback loops. So
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's not about the creativity. It's
So-
another goal.
So it looks like we already have two patterns. One is what we call creative constraints, and the other is rapid prototyping.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can, let's try to kind of flush out these two patterns and then see if there's one
If
meta
they are the same
pattern.
or different, so actually it's very good that we start with those two patterns, and if they have the same structure, the same forces, and the same solution, we make one of these. But it's actually, that's why I like the past metaphor so much. If you have one pass that goes like this, another pass that goes like this, I would agree it's the same pattern. It's very similar, right? Even if it's different in the particulars, it's still the same pattern. However, if you have another part that also starts here, it might have the same goal, the same starting position, but it's a different pattern. It's a different reason why you go this path and this one. Right. So, and that's when we have two pattern documents, we will see whether we are, in this case, they are very similar, or whether we have two different things achieving the same.
So, is it okay if we work on these? I suggest we just I opened up these. I'm actually screencasting this. So do we want to start with the rapid prototyping or with the creative constraints?
And if you have rapid prototyping, should it be rapid hyper prototyping or rapid prototyping? Because otherwise it's just like rapid prototyping.
Let's not worry about the hybridity now. Let's first get the ideas, and then
I think.
I mean, if the end is to come up with a language for hybrid education, right? We don't want to have hybrid in the name of every pattern. It's kind of assumed that this rapid prototype. So there's something about the context of this pattern which would realize the hybridity of it, or something about the solution. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But first, I think we need to kind of get an idea of what is this about, right? So
I think that may jump in. That happens very often. That you, if you focus on a specific context, you always get the comment that this pattern is also applicable in different contexts. So actually, there are many patterns that are applicable in hybrid pedagogy, but also in other ways, and that's good. It's still the same pattern, but it might be even more relevant for hybrid pedagogy. It might be less relevant for other ways, but it's still the same pattern.
Yes, but I think having worked a lot with mock-ups and rapid prototyping and stuff like that, I think just having the word hybrid prototyping is something radically different than prototyping in my mind, working with prototyping. And I think that would, be, for me at least, important to kind of have in mind, because otherwise it's just normal prototyping like we do everywhere else, but we are here to work on hybrid pedagogy and hybridity. So what is hybrid?
Okay,
right. So
how do we make it hybrid, or what is the hybridity of the nature of prototyping, that could also be the way around it. And to kind of foreground that in the description would actually enable us to make new patterns and not.
Yeah.
And that might be that hybrid prototyping
I
might
think
be.
we're having a kind of philosophical debate about something which we don't really know yet what it is. So let's first understand what is the object we're talking about, and then we'll decide if, you know, it's an example of hybridity or if it's more general and there's a sub-pattern that's hybrid about. But first of all, I mean, you guys had that on your table, right? Let's understand what did you have in mind?
So maybe one comment is that this really has to be decided before. I agree we should do it on the hybridity, because this would change how we write the pattern. We can write it more general that it applies everywhere, or we can always think about what are the additional opportunities with hybridity. I think we should think in that direction. But I still would not put it in the name here, because if we have about 100 patterns here, they always have to have so many setting.
Yeah, so I would say I would put it in the name and then I would delete it in the end.
I think you just reminded us that we need to think about hybridity in all the.
So I believe in being from Nordic language literature, I like word allergic.
Stop being a word nut.
I think it would change the whole writing workshop if we just have it there and then.
Fine. Hybrid, rapid prototyping. You know.
Hybrid, obsessive, compulsive.
Now what? Do we start from the context, the problem, the solution? What do we write first?
I think the easiest here is probably the solution. You have it in
Okay, so what's the solution?
You know, if Steve wants to add something, is it easy? Will he?
Yeah, he's
adding something.
He's editing as we go along,
Yeah.
right? He's so that don't worry, it's Steve. I mean, he's with us. Yeah. So, what is the solution? I mean,
Well, there's the reference to the other patterns, time concept, or come up with an early prototype, or what? It's an early prototype. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be done in a set time constraint. That's the core solution.
Yeah.
so this is you telling the students to do rapid prototyping, right?
Yeah.
So it's
another
about
important question: who's applying this pattern or the solution? So and these are usually the persons you address the solution also to. Some kind of do this. That's the action in order to reach this, and then come to the consequences. And do this means that both the process, but maybe also a thing, an artifact that you created.
I mean, to abstract it a little bit from the actual assignment, like the audio assignment for 20 minutes, the idea was talking to another instructor who's trying to get students more engaged around doing something like this. Like this, here's one way to do it. You know, make it an exercise within the classroom, give it a time limit, and let them build something and then discuss it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be an audio, it doesn't have to be this.
Yeah. There's also there's this start right away. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Important stuff. And come to quickly to a point where you start reflecting, discussing.
Yeah.
And that's, so I got the students I have, and that was the problem. If they start writing their bachelor thesis, they have in some work. This is recorded, right? So they have in a way they have learned very often to think too much, because analytical thinking is so important in computer science. And yes, you can think everything through and it will still be false. Have something in your hands and it will be right. So, and that's where the hybridity comes in. With today's tools, it's so much easier to create something. You have a 3D printer, you have mock-up tools ready. You can just drag and drop your mockup. So that this is really, you can do it in within 20 minutes. And that's different to maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
That's right. It does make a difference to people do that.
But also perhaps knowing where to start, know when to end. So yes, that's the time thing. So there's, the rapid part. Also, if there, if you have a week, rapid prototyping can also be a week. It can also be an hour. It can also, so rapid prototyping can mean a lot of things depending on the bachelor project. But their week would be a rapid prototype. Like half a year. But also perhaps, there's a, you talk about is like a rhythm to the process of the rapid prototyping. So give it what's called sequencing process or something like that.
So I've written, set a task for a student, give them a short time to complete it. Steve added, avoid creating stress and anxiety. The time box should be enough to get something done, but not enough to perfect it or obsess over it. Take advantage of a technology that supports rapid production, even if this comes at the expense of the quality of the product. Yeah.
Two reactions immediately. One is, this is about all kinds of tasks, and then I would immediately answer myself no.
Yeah.
Reading tasks has nothing to do with rapid, so it has to be a design or something building, something with creating. Otherwise, it's not working. So that should be probably added.
So that's probably part of.
You can make a rapid prototype of an exam paper. Here, make your exam paper in 30 minutes.
That's some, but the task is also read this chapter in a book. That's a task, and you give it 20 minutes to read it. But not certainly not rapid prototype.
Oh,
so
yeah,
more precise.
But if I say you have 20 minutes to write a summary of this chapter, that forces you to skim read it and try to get the key ideas in 20 minutes.
Something is created, something is built.
Okay, so is that part?
That's an important aspect.
So is that?
Yeah.
So is that part of the context or the problem? Or, I mean, no, the fact that we're talking about when you're giving students a task that requires production or creation, right? Is this part of the context or the problem?
Context. Do something, create something.
Yeah.
And you also probably do it at the very beginning. If you are late for the project, your prototypes become more.
And I do think, speaking of that, the problem, depending upon if we're talking about hybrid teaching or hybrid learning or hybrid prototyping, rapid prototyping, the problem was like getting the students engaged and actually doing something, right? Like immediately. Yeah. And so it was actually like a very focused pedagogical approach to a solution. Maybe a problem you're having that, you said already, go through the second hour, right? Students start to yawn, and you can tell that there's not that. Now, this is a way to kind of deal with that, right? There's not that energy. This will help hopefully create energy around the process and the thinking.
Yeah.
The second part.
Yeah.
So that's the energy. Should we go in the forces somehow put in energy? Because that's some people lose energy quickly otherwise. I don't know how to express it yet, but that's a force.
Yeah.
And lots of energy or focus. Another thing in the context is the exploration mode you're in. That's why you do great. That's why you're not doing it in detail. Just you want to test the waters.
It's divergent.
Yeah. So yeah.
But where did the test ideas quickly come from? Candidates. What? Well, I like the test ideas quickly.
Yeah.
Could that be the pattern?
Well, it's here as an alternative name for the pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we just started with one name and we noted that there's alternative names, right? And that's, but okay, so one of the forces is that you lose energy. Another is that you kind of you deadlock, right? I mean, if you're given a task and it seems too big, you kind of then, you kind of, you don't know where to start. You think, you have to get it perfect, and
That,
so,
like idea of creator's block or writer's block, whatever you want to call it.
They spend too long time talking about stuff and reflecting on it rather than actually producing it.
I think also one point is actually that having a common object. Also sort of helps you talk about it. because
Externalization of.
Exactly. And sort of common ground, because you talk a lot and you think you understand each other, but you don't, you suddenly have a product. And then-
Yeah,
So
like a shared object.
Talk about
Yeah.
something with.
That's a good moment to jump in and ask, why is this a problem? That's what's wrong with when the students sit there, they discuss, and they reflect on it a lot, and it takes 3 hours.
Because time is an issue. So you don't have
And
unlimited
they don't
amount of time.
produce something, they spend time talking about it rather than producing something. We want to see something on the table. I don't like the word evaluate up there in the context, because I want something on the table that we can then evaluate.
and I think this debate is really unsubstantiated. It's like us talking about patterns before we actually saw a pattern. So we kind of get into this abstract, airy-fairy debate, but we don't have a sense of the thing.
Also like that we think we know what the other person is talking about, but actually we realize when we then externalize that thinking into a prototype that we are talking about radically different things. So suddenly we see the differences, or we see the opportunities for like, okay, so we thought we had an amazing idea and already read it or something like that. So there's a lot of opportunities to make those important discoveries that when we talk about it, it sounds nice, or it sounds the same, or it sounds but then when we put it there on the table, suddenly we see that it's not the case.
And I think that's right. I think like even the game outside, right? I came out there and can you guess what I was doing? And so I picked up on the patterns you were building. I could say it. And the same thing, like I could get up in front of a class and say, here's how you create an audio assignment story, and spend a half an hour talking about it rather than saying, here's the specifics, build it. In 20 minutes, we're going to come and look at it. And what did you learn? What did you didn't? And so it's just a different way of teaching that process altogether.
And it's also kind of a bottom-up process, right? So rather than me trying to explain what it means to make a problem statement or make a game, say make a game, and then we'll talk about what good games are and what a game is. Around that one.
So that's
So that's the whole point why I use prototypes. It's just before we even start talking about, go make a game, come back in 30 minutes, then we'll talk about games.
I like that.
So there's it's called objects to talk with.
Yes.
So there's the basic idea of constructionism is that you have objects to think with. That creating an object, it actually kind of drives our thinking process. But also here we're putting the objects in the shared space, and they become objects to talk with.
Yeah, and for me, the objects to talk about something with. So it's because they need to have an aim, like go make a game and we'll talk about games when we get back, because that's something we'll talk about, or we'll talk about rule structures, or we'll talk about something.
So would you agree with me that in context the word evaluation would be there? Because we're not interested in evaluating until the thing's there.
Yeah, I think that
it
it
leads to evaluation, that it should lead to a.
yeah, but perhaps I prefer critical reflection, but that's probably perhaps me, something to critically reflect, on the.
Yeah, but once it's there.
Yeah, once it's there.
Right?
Yes, yeah, you should actually make something
there.
Some part of the pattern, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
The pattern does not contain the
Evaluation.
or
Yeah.
evaluation.
You want the product.
Yes.
So-
It should be a good pattern, I guess. It should be part of it. That you also need to reflect that.
Otherwise, if it's not in there, then they just produce something in
And
2
then
minutes and
fine.
that's there.
One of the things,
Yeah.
And the important part of that is, of course, what to do with that. So that should be part of the solution then.
I also think that's the difference for me, at least, between objects to talk with and objects to talk about something with. Because if you know what you're talking about, you can have that critical reflection. You can say, well, this is a nice piece of paper, but it's actually not a game, you know, because a game, so and so and so. So that's where for me the critical reflection on the innovation part comes in. If they're making a design for a supermarket, or if they're making a design for a lake, you know, that's, you know, this might only fly in one of those contexts. So it's not just making something, it's making something to talk about something, for me at least.
And what the importance is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It can also be used, I think, and I like that also a couple of times, making students discovering problems in this specific context, and then you have something you can more easily connect to when explaining concepts, because they run into problems or they kind of identified some of the concepts themselves, but they're still fuzzy, and then you can take them from there.
Hello, Steve wrote here that, you know, when we say time constraint, actually limiting time here is part of the solution. So even if you have a lot of time, you still constrain it to, you need to produce this in 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and I think forcing people to do things in a shorter time is, it's a creative constraint, but it's something that introduces more playfulness, because they're less self-conscious.
Sure.
I think it actually releases stress rather than, well, it makes them stressful, of course, but it releases a different kind of stress, because then if you kind of say, okay, you only have 20 minutes to put something out there, it releases the perfectionism of the student mind. Okay, I can't, you know, let's go get some more. Yeah, but of course there's another kind of stress, there's a time stress. But I don't think the time stress is more destructive than the perfectionism stress that they would have, like having a month. They would just like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but if you know that you can't get, it's obvious that you can't get this right in 10 minutes. So I think really. Christian, these things that I'm not sure that some of the things we have here on the forces are actually part of the solution, right? So this, right? I'm saying, you know, there's all kinds of things that are being put into the forces section, but I think they're actually part of the solution or the implementation details.
The solution mirrors the forces. So everything that is, every force should be addressed in the solution. So it's,
okay, but these are the way they're being addressed, because we haven't really written a lot about the solution, although we've been talking quite a lot about it.
The second is, I wanted to say two things. So one was the production prototyping task, and the other aspect that we could make this more specific by making that a production type task that requires various technologies or unknown technologies or whatever to add this hybrid aspect for that specific because I think that's or that requires making use of technology they haven't used before. That could be reflected, and it's not take advantage of technology, but make that an essential part of the task.
Yeah, like so for example, with the audio one, only use sounds from freesounds.org. So that's a sound repository that's free and open source online, and anyone can download. So you're creating an online story using free online resources to wrap prototype. So yeah, I mean, you could. I think though hybrid becomes like digital, right? It becomes a meaningless adjective after all, right? Because it is, and it's becoming, and it's how we're living our space regardless. It's important for certain points, but it also has its problems as a catch-all.
But it could also be hybrid, like, for me hybrid is acting transformatory or transgressive in relation to a dichotomy of some sort. So it could also be a bit like I talked about, or I've worked with some prototyping in like philosophically oriented classes, like take philosophy, make robots perform it, make a prototype that expresses existentialism in 30 minutes, use this and this text. That would be a hybrid for me, because it's not, it would be a fusion of something very playful, something very text heavy, something very constructionistic, and suddenly I have to make robots enact existentialism. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
And that takes you to that, what was it, Bonnie or Mahan that said, that new space, not a third space, not the middle space, but the new space. So for me, actually, hybridity is not necessarily on my offline, but it's something that connects two dimensions that are not necessarily or traditionally connected in some way. Because I agree, if it's just blending stuff, then yes, but we're doing it right now, right? We're sitting here with.
But if everything's creating a new space, like hybridity suggests, then everything becomes new, right? And that's formation. I mean, obviously, it's philosophical, we don't walk on that, but it does beg some of the linguistic limits of the word.
But then you need to connect it to the problem, right? So say, why would you make this hybrid? But that could be because students can have problems seeing the point of philosophy, something like that.
I think it would be, if I may jump in, there is already a pattern described called prototyping, I think. And pedagogical patterns, if I'm right, or something similar to that. We could also have a pattern with the context is you want to apply rapid prototyping. And then the problem is that they only use the technologies and the ways they are used to be, and so they're stuck in they're not growing. And the solution is to add this hybrid aspect to it. Require that they build a prototype using new unknown technologies.
Or make two prototypes using different technologies.
Or something like that. But that would be actually, then it's also not the kind of problem anymore that you're kind of rewriting an existing pattern, but writing a more specific version and focusing on the hybrid aspect. And that's missing in the rapid prototyping. You could apply it, but if you apply it as this, then there's a high chance that you're missing some very powerful aspects of hybridity. That would be another option. So some of the things that just it's an option.
So
it's not about online or offline. I think that's for me that's also very important thing. It's duality that it involves. For example, being in a room where I can build something on the computer, and then a most simple example is just say print, like the printer. But I can also have a 3D print out, or I can actually have video play for what I was doing here, or make an installation. Also works the other way around. If you think about games, like computer games, right? You can have a framework of specific game classes, right? They're ready, and you do the drawing on sticky notes on cards. You just put it on the scanner, and your drawing becomes a figure in the game. Or you use Lego bricks to do the pixels. You put it on the scanner, and you have a new character that animates. This is kind of the why do I do something on the computer visually? Why do I do something in the real world? So when do I switch between these?
I think also within thinking about hybridity, to me, it would also be sort of shortcutting the students. They always think they have to think deeply about things before they do something. This is exactly a way of saying to them, well, actually, sometimes
First,
you don't overthink it. You need to just do something. Because reflection and action and doing things is also a way of promoting theoretical reflection, promoting. So theory and practice has to sort of come together.
So
hybridity is also the conversation students that have, like, do something, talk about why you did this, do something, talk about why you did this, a bit like we did in the game design lab. And that is actually theorizing in a certain way, but they think theorizing or something or analyzing is about thinking in here, not doing anything, and then having the answer and sending it off.
Yeah.
And that's not how we do research or, produce knowledge. It's actually those kind of processes. And rapid prototyping is,
An example of a very hybrid process in the way that.
yeah.
I think right now we have the best example of a hybrid prototype. This is prototype we're doing here, right? And we do it in the room, we speak together. We have some participants who are somewhere else using this digital collaboration. This is what we're doing. This is a rapid prototype in a hybrid space.
Yeah.
And
we have Steve participating from outside, and so it's we're very good at eating our own dog food.
And why it's working so well is so I always tell my students, you talk to the artifact. Once you do something, it talks to you back. You can't do that in your
Tune.
Sorry?
Donald Tune. Design is conversation with materials of a situation.
Okay.
So you're talking to the artifact, and the artifact talks to you.
Yeah.
And through the artifact, you're talking to the other people. I think this is a good place to end this session, and then just break up and start doing some rapid prototyping of patterns in smaller teams.
Coffee and cake.
Coffee and cake first? Okay, so. Okay, so Steve, you're the only one online. Go have a coffee, because we're all breaking for coffee. And
Share some aspects.
Sure. One is using the other.
so that's it. That's the end of this session.